Hi, everyone.
Hi again. We're on page 136 of the Proclaimer's book. And in the last section, the subhead here still is, did the alarm clock go off too soon? They've concentrated on not on their embarrassment about 1914, what went wrong, but rather upon the idea that, well, we didn't have everything straight. We didn't quite understand what was supposed to happen.
But we were alert.
We were on the alert, and we're humble enough to change when God points it out, right? Well, they go on in that particular direction, drift, I would say. Here's the last sentence of the previous section, so you get the continuity. But that alarm clock had not gone off too soon. Actually, it was the experiences to which the clock had awakened them that were not exactly what they had expected. Some years later, when the light had grown brighter, they acknowledged many of the dear saints thought that all the work was done. They rejoiced because of the clear proof that the world had ended.
That's strange phraseology. I'm surprised they would still use it.
But that's what they did say at the time.
Yeah.
Rather than be embarrassed and admit they were stupid,
Yeah.
they just said, the world has ended, you just don't understand like we
notice.
understand.
Yeah.
That the kingdom of heaven was at hand, yeah, they were still saying that for sure, and the day of their deliverance drew nigh.
And they're still saying that.
But they had overlooked something else that must be done. The good news that they had received must be told to others, because Jesus had commanded, this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then the end shall come.
Matthew 24:14. But at the time,
What did they teach?
they taught that Christendom had fulfilled that
Yeah.
by giving Bibles to everyone, getting them published and translated.
The Bible Societies of Christendom, they said, had already fulfilled Matthew 24:14. We'll put a link on to that at the
And
end.
they were preaching during that time.
They
And
sure were.
publishing books, but with all kinds of false dates.
Well, that's why they didn't publish a Bible of their own until 1950. They started in 1950, but they thought it would all be over by long before 1950. So they depended upon the Bibles of Christendom, specifically the King James Bible, the Revised Standard Bible of the 1880s, and called the RV, by the way. It's not the RSV of later.
Yeah.
The RV, Revised Version of the King James, and the American Standard in 1901 were the Bibles they used.
As events followed 1914 began to unfold, and the Bible students compared these with what the Master had foretold, they gradually came to appreciate that they were living in the last days of the old system, and that they had been since 1914. They also came to understand that it was in the year 1914 that Christ's invisible presence had begun, and that this was not by his personally returning, even invisibly, to the vicinity of the earth, but by his directing his attention toward the earth as ruling king. They saw and accepted the vital responsibility that was theirs to proclaim this good news of the kingdom, for a witness to all nations during this critical time of human history. What exactly was the message about the kingdom that they were to preach? Was it any different from the message of the first century Christians? You bet it was.
Well, again, the light getting brighter, as we saw in the previous chapter. This is everywhere here, excusing every one of their mistakes. Well, on the one hand, you want give the appearance that you're humble enough to change, and you definitely get that. It drips off the page here. But on the other hand, you're not humble enough to admit what you had to change. For instance, the dates that you set after the 1914 disappointment. You set the date 1915, 1918, 1920, 1921, then 1925.
So it doesn't make you humble enough to realize maybe I shouldn't be saying anything.
Yeah. So this idea that, well, we have the date right, but we got the events wrong. Well, your credibility is at stake here. So you on the one hand, you're humble enough to change, but you're not humble enough to keep your mouth shut.
But, the humility to change, too, is just you're forced to change.
Yeah.
After the dates come and go, you have to change.
Yeah, and built into the progressive light idea from Proverbs 4:18, the day getting brighter, the light getting brighter and brighter, unto the perfect day. You have always assumed that it's already the perfect day. That's why you called your book The Finished Mystery.
Yeah.
Not only in 1917, but again in 1969. Then is finished the mystery of God. You've always assumed that the perfect day was here, and you've preached it.
And even their understanding of 1914, yes, that changed drastically. They didn't believe that the presence started. They already had a date for the presence.
1874.
Yeah.
And they had a date for the beginning of the last days. They said they gradually understood. They came to appreciate that they were living in the last days. They kept preaching 1799 right up into the 1930s.
Yeah.
As the beginning of the last days.
So they shift when they have to shift it. That's not humility.
Well, what's this phrase, directing his attention to? Read the sentence
That's
again.
a very familiar phrase. I remember that one.
They also came to understand that it was in the year 1914 that Christ's invisible presence had begun, and that this was not by his personally returning, which the church has always taught, and you believed at the beginning, even invisibly, to the vicinity of the earth, but by his directing his attention toward the earth as ruling king.
So the directing of attention is always tied to that period of time when they're tested.
Yeah.
And then God chooses them, because of their sparkling reputation of
And
always
spotless
telling
record.
the truth. Yeah.
Yeah. So directing his attention, who do I need to consult to find out that he's directing his attention? Well,
Us.
the cycle of dependence again, which is trust us, we know, but you've never known in the past.
Yeah.
It's a masterful piece of propaganda. This just enough truth to make you think they're transparent, but not enough truth to give you the actual picture of what was going on at the time.
So I do think we should mention, when they talk about, we realized something had to be done, and it was the preaching of the good news. And then they reference a Watchtower from 1925. So what were they preaching in the 20s? They were preaching the millions. That was the campaign of the millions now living will never die.
That's right.
That's what they were preaching.
And they were
And
preaching.
that was proved false too.
And in that book, Millions book, and in the Harp of God, and in books for years to come, they were still preaching that the kingdom had been set up in heaven, not in 1914, but in 1878.
I mean, I remember them talking about the millions. And, I mean, this is in the 70s. So I wished I'd thought more about timelines back then. I was not good with timelines. But if I'd thought about that, you're preaching that in the 20s. It's in the 70s. Those millions.
Most of them are already dead.
Yeah.
And now they're all dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why brag about that particular campaign?
Yeah. It's vexing just to read this. The way they've written it.
Yeah.
What's our links?
We're linking to a video called Parousia, Shall We Trust the Watchtower or the Greek Scholars? And you're reading from a pamphlet that you put together.
On the parousia from the Greek scholars, yeah.
So it's the first
of two
videos.
First of two.
Follow the links.
Yeah.
And if you want, the document is on our website. So that's onewonders.org.
In the PDF archive.
And we'll also put in the playlist for Acts to address this question of, was it any different from the message of the first century Christians? I do a whole series going through Acts of what they were preaching.
Yeah, and surprise, surprise, not only are they not preaching the Tetragrammaton, they're not preaching the kingdom either. This was a shock to both of us when we actually got out our concordance and checked it.
Yeah.
See you next time.